The military designation is the TG-14. It's the Jamongo, and it's the only aircraft that the military and NASA use. So, and we have it here, so if you want to see it, you're welcome to see it. Again, my name is Mike Shear. I'm only been a member for a couple of years here, and I didn't start flying until I was in my mid-40s. A friend of mine invited me to go flying in a glider up at 29 Palms. And, when I was younger, I had kids, and I didn't have the money to go fly or to really take on that challenge, and because family came first. But for the time being, while I was working, I was flying remote control gliders and stuff with my kids, doing everything I could with my kids. Long story short, I did not get to do that with my dad. And once I had children, my Heavenly Father taught me that this is what we're supposed to do with our children. We're supposed to raise them up properly. And so I didn't want to do the same thing that my dad did with my family. So anyway, what I'm going to be discussing is 4 different types of weather that we use for soaring. So let's go to the first. And also, I want to thank Sid. All the stuff that I've had to do this previous week, getting ready for this, he has just been phenomenal in helping me put this together. So thank you, Sid. I appreciate it. Okay, let's go to the first slide. Okay, this I drew up, so trust me, the graphics are going to get much better after this. So, do you have that? Do you have the pointer? Which one is it? This one here?
You want to do
The red?
Yeah. Right there.
Okay. Okay, so this is just a simple drawing of what a thermal looks like. For a thermal to exist, we have to have heating from the sun. It just happens. You see dust devils out there across the ground. And what's happening is you have the sun heating the ground, and then you have cooler air aloft. And so when 2 surfaces are heated unequally, the warmer air expands and becomes more buoyant, and it rises. And then heavier, denser air that is around pushes down and then helps. Am I talking loud enough? Can you everybody hear me okay? I'm not sure if I even need the microphone. Cooler air has to be present to get warm air to rise. If everything is all warm, if all the air is warm in the ground and pretty much at altitude, it's considered a stable air mass, and there's really not enough a lift for soaring conditions. So what we have here is just a drawing of, this is basically up to 29 Palms Airport. So here we have a tetrahedron, and we have wind socks at the different points of the airport. So what happens is, when we're at the airport and it's morning, we're getting the aircraft ready, we're waiting for the conditions to start to kick off so we can go soaring. We're looking not only at the wind socks, and you can see these wind socks are aiming in different directions. So this one's bringing air this direction, this one's bringing air this direction. And a lot of times that tetrahedron will sit there in the morning, it's aimed one direction. We got a steady breeze. And all of a sudden that thing will start to spin. And what that's telling us is we have, we have lift that's going off here, going off over here, different parts of the airport, and that tetrahedron will start to spin. Of course, as soon as it starts to spin, everyone knows, okay, the thermals are starting to get strong, time to get the aircraft staged and ready to take off. So when you see a thermal, as the air is being drawn in, you have sinking air on the outside, because the sinking air, heavier air, has to exist to help force up the warmer air. This lift right here is really, really strong. You have lift on both sides, which is not quite as strong, but it's still good lift. And then again, on the outside, you have sinking air. And this is what it looks like from the top. The core, real strong lift. Out here, fair lift. And then all the way around is sinking air. For those, yes?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do they always spin in the same direction?
That's a good question. We're looking at thermals. You're driving down the road, you see a thermal. Sometimes they're big enough you can see. And I have seen them turn in different directions. Now you would think with a low pressure, with a low pressure they would be circulating in a certain direction. But I have seen them turn in different directions. As a matter of fact, when we're thermaling, and I have a short video here later on in the presentation, where I'm actually looking down at the thermal, and it's nice to it's best to fly against the direction, the current, okay? So anyway, those of you that fly powered aircraft, especially out here in the desert, at the right time of the year when we have cooler altitude temperatures that aren't too far away from the airport, and you fly through them, you get that boom. You feel the aircraft do that. What's happening is you're actually flying through sinking air first, because remember, we have to have cold air pushing down and warm air rising up. So what happens is you're flying through that. Sometimes you rock the wing or something like that, where actually you're flying in a direction like this, where you might cross over here where part of your aircraft, because closer to the ground, the thermals are tighter. You'll have one wing come up and the other wing will drop, and it can kind of feel kind of unsettling sometimes, especially with really strong lift. One of my first flights with my youngest son, Kyle, we were in a Blanik L-13. We were behind the tow plane, and I watched the tow plane do this and then come up, and then I thought, okay, get ready, son, here comes the thermal. Well, he had his water bottle sitting in his lap. And I said, hang on, son, and all of a sudden we went to the sink, and I looked, and his water bottle was turning in the air in front of him, and he reached up and he grabs it, and he goes, whoa. So, if you're not waiting for something like that, you fly with really strong lift, it can be unsettling.
How light can these be? Do you have any idea?
The closer to the ground, the tighter they are. And that's why it's really important when you are thermaling close to the ground. We generally don't thermal closer than 1,000 feet of the ground, and you are right next to the airport. The other thing you need to be aware of is being that close to the ground. You don't want to be thermaling too aggressively, because what can happen is if you're searching for good lift, because you don't want to land, we're trying to get high and stay high, as they say. You could be flying, searching for the thermal, and then find the thermal, and it might be on your right side. You're banking over to it, you're inputting right rudder, and that wing will not drop. It's like a bucking bronco. It's trying to kick you out of the thermal. You have to be able to, the best way to do it is to actually fly directly into the center or over here and start thermaling. If you're flying through this direction, you feel one wing lift, you know what side of the aircraft that the thermal's on, and you know which way you're going to have to come back to get into the core. So also, that close to the ground, within 1,000 feet, you want to make sure that you maintain good airspeed. What happens is when you fly through that core, that air is rising so fast that what happens is as that wingtip goes through the core, the angle of attack changes on that wingtip, and you can stall that wingtip. And I've seen guys that had experience that got out of the glider on the ground, and they looked white. I mean, I thought that they were going in. So it's really, really important, especially when you're flying that close to the ground. You look at 1,000 feet, you stall a wingtip, you can eat up a few hundred feet really, really quick. So anyway, does everybody understand what the thermal structure looks like here? Okay. Okay, these are a soaring index. Let me go to the next one here. Years ago when I was a student, you can go online to the NOAA and get this soaring site. Now, we only selected just we only selected this bottom piece. This actually goes way up. This is it shows all these different sites. Here's 29 Palms. Here's El Mirage. There is Toro Peak. There's the high desert. There's San Diego. There's the beaches. All of them in here. And they all show, not only here the soaring site, it shows the elevation 29 Palms is 1,888 feet. That's the highest point on the airport. El Mirage is 3,000. The max temperature in degrees is why that is important, is because if we have the weather, we know what the upper altitude temperatures are, and we can find out basically if it's going to be a good soaring day. This is the top of the lift, so if you have really strong lift, this is going to top out at 4,590. This one's going to top out at 57 plus. This is really not a very good soaring day. I took these from just the other day. And so, this might be a good day if you want to go out and practice with your CFI behind the tow plane. You can do boxing the wake, that type of thing. Take a 3,000 foot tow and do your turn to headings and stalls at 3,000 feet. We don't do any maneuvers below 1,500 feet. But it's a good time to do that. But and here, this is the soaring index. This is in feet per minute. So 132 feet. It's not very good. 324. If you're in a 233 that's got a 23-to-1 glider, you can probably sustain. If you can find a thermal, you can sustain and not lose any altitude. But again, it's not a really good soaring day. This is the ratings here. Poor. Anything below 200 feet is poor. And the next slide I'll show you that. This is the trigger temperature. So with the sorry, this the trigger temperature. So this is the max temperature over here for the day. So it's going to be colder than that earlier in the morning, but once the air gets to about 64 degrees, somewhere in there, that's enough change in temperature for lift to start triggering away from the ground. Now, that's just enough to get it to trigger. It's probably enough to soar in, okay? And that will show you here. These numbers here, the 64 and 71, they're pretty close together, so that tells you that, okay, it's really not going to be a good soaring day. And then this is, if there's enough clouds, this is going to be the base of the cumulus cloud, 10,154. But then again, if it's probably not very good lift. So I'm going to go back. Okay, this is the soaring index ratings here. In feet per minute. You got poor, fair, good, excellent, super, and then there's times where during the summertime, especially the monsoon time, the phone starts ringing in the morning. Hey Mike, have you seen the soaring index? Let's go to the airport, come on. And it's just absolutely booming. And what's really cool is you'll take off behind the tow plane and you're on the runway, you're going down and you see the tetrahedron out there turning. So you gotta be careful because dust devils or currents can come across the airport when you're on tow. And you got guys, all the guys, a lot of guys around the airport are looking, keeping an eye out for dust devils or currents that can really upset the aircraft that close to the ground. And you can tell when you see the tow plane rock and you know that the glider, he's on tow, he's got his hands full. He's looking to make sure he's got good control because you are hooked up to another aircraft. And you don't want to break the weak link. The gliders, we have our tow rope, but then we have a weak link at each end that can break. It's really strong, but it can break, so that way you're not going to break any part of the aircraft. Okay. Okay, this is my Schweitzer glider. This is a Schweitzer 126. They made the serial numbers go to 700. This is serial number 500. This is the first one from the fuselage back, from here back to here. This is the first one in history that's aluminum. The ones previous to this were all steel tubing with canvas. So like the old biplanes, that's what they were like. This is the prototype E model. The first one, the last one's in a museum. And I did a 3.5-year restoration on it. I spent some time doing the restoration on it because my other business is swimming pools. I service and repair swimming pools, and during the summertime, after working all day in the hot sun, who wants to come out and pull a wing out of a trailer to strip it and do it. So anyway, that's why it took me 3.5 years. Well, I got invited to Tehachapi, California. Somebody with the Vintage Sailplane Regatta heard that I was restoring the aircraft, and they said, hey, we heard that you're finished restoring your aircraft. Would you bring it? I said, yeah, I'll not only bring it, but I'll fly it. So I drove it up there, got it out of the trailer. I have a totally enclosed trailer for it. And there were people there from Elmira, New York, where the Schweitzer factory is. And they looked in and they said these things weren't this nice when they were new. So I was really happy. I put a lot of work into it, and I made custom seat cushions for the interior. I don't let very many people fly it. A good friend of mine that I let fly it. He says on his first flight, he goes, Mike, this is like flying a lazy boy with wings. He says it really flies nice. And matter of fact, Tyler, do you know Tyler Johns? He was a pilot. He was the CHP rotorcraft and fixed wing for the CHP for California. He still is, but he moved. He's in Northern California now. Well, his last day at 29 Palms, he came out just to have one more final hurrah. Well, I was up there with this, and I told him, I said, you know what, Tyler, go ahead and take my 126. He goes, oh, no. I said, no, you got enough experience. Come on, you take it. I'll fly the club ship. Are you sure? Yeah. So anyway, he takes off, and I could see some convergence over the top. This is in 29 Palms, over the top of Joshua Tree National Park. And I could see the clouds forming. I can tell there was convergence going on. So I got him on the radio, and I said, head south and head a little bit west. You're going to get into convergence. Well, later on that day, he came back, and he goes, Mike, I got the 17-1. He's been higher in my aircraft than I've ever been in my aircraft. And he goes, it was the most epic flight I've ever been on. So he was very thankful. My highest flight in this is 16,100 over the Sierras, my first time up over the Sierras. And I was probably giggling like a little schoolgirl, because it was just one of the most amazing things I've ever done, and to see that far, you know. But anyway, that's the original canopy. That's 1970, so it's 50 plus years. So, overdevelopment. This is one thing that we need to be very careful of when we're flying gliders. The atmosphere can be very, very unstable at times, especially in the monsoon season. And this is taken in the high desert. It's kind of hard to see, but right here, this is 29 Palms Marine Corps Base. Now it's kind of secluded in a lot of clouds here, but so you can't see it, but it's right here. And we would get these developments that would build up in the high desert. One of the things that happens up in the high desert is, first of all, the ground, it's already got a 2,000 foot altitude above where we're at. We're what, 114 below right here, I think is what it is. So the ground up there is already 2,000 plus feet. So it's got that much of a gain on altitude. So that it's already closer to the cooler upper atmosphere temperatures. Well, the sun is still just baking this ground. And in the summertime, you know how hot it gets here. It gets cooking. I mean, it just cooks. Now, there's times where we have a stable air mass over the inland empire or the high desert, and everything is just hot. It's like I say, it's great for training. It's kind of uncomfortable to fly in because you're sitting in an aircraft with no air conditioning. But if you want to fly, you guys know what that's like. When you want to fly, you go fly. But what happens is we'll get a low pressure that will come through. Now, the high pressure circulates clockwise, and the pressure is down and out. That's the way high pressure is. Low pressure circulates counterclockwise. The air movement is in and up, and it draws in. That low pressure draws in a lot of moisture. So the best time to fly for gliders is right after a low pressure, because what happens is you've got, with the high pressure, you get all this heating going on, and it's just cooking the ground. And of course, everybody knows how hot it gets here in the summertime. At nighttime, it's still cooking. The ground is still just baking, okay? Well, then we'll get this low pressure come through, and it brings all this moisture in. And what that moisture does is it adds energy to the atmosphere. As air rises, okay, if you have a dry column of air, as it rises, it's cooling at approximately 3.5 degrees for every 1,000 feet. when you add moisture to that air, that moisture actually holds heat and it doesn't cool as quick as it's rising. So what happens is you have a warm column of air that's rising, and that column of air that's rising stays warmer than the surrounding air at altitude. It just continues to rise. Now, one of the things that happens is right here at the base, if you got enough moisture, what happens is that air starts to condensate. You've heard of the weather people talk about the dew point. Oh, today's dew point is 46, or what happens, or whatever. Well, they've taken that calculation with the air temperature, the moisture, the pressure, all that is put into the calculation. So what happens is that air is rising. Once it reaches, say, the dew point's 46 degrees, the air can no longer hold moisture as a gas. It turns it into a solid, and that's where the cloud starts to form. Well, when you get superheated air here, as in like a high desert, and you get enough moisture mixed in there, what happens is, as the air starts to condense, and it turns into like a fog, or the cloud starts to form, the molecules start to tumble together right at the base of the cloud, and believe it or not, it actually builds even a little more heat. And so what happens is you'll start to get this overdevelopment here. Now, it's beautiful, but it ain't fun to fly in, ain't fun to be around. I've had overdevelopment over Lake Elsinore when I was in my aircraft, over about 9,000 feet, over just south of Santiago Peak, which is up by Orange County. And we had a low pressure that had moved in. We had overdevelopment in Temecula. We had over the Inland Empire west of Canyon Lake, and then going north towards Orange County. It was all around. The only place where it was not overdeveloped was to the beach. And when I'm over the Santa Ana Mountains, you can look right down. You can see the waves crashing on the beach by San Clemente, and it's beautiful. But looking to the Inland Empire, we had a lot of this overdevelopment. It's pretty freaky when you're flying along in your glider and then you watch a lightning bolt, boom, hit the ground. I mean, it really gets your attention. One of the CFIs at Lake Elsinore got me on the radio. He goes, Mike, where are you at? And I said, I'm at 9,000 feet over the ridge. And he goes, okay, son, I want to let you know we got overdevelopment here, and I could see this gust front that had hit Temecula. There was a downpour just like this. It's kind of hard to see here, but there was just this wall of water. And if you ever have a microburst with a cloud, what happens is as that air comes out, it pushes. You see all that dust that comes out from underneath it. It's displacing all that air. It's quite beautiful. It looks like an upside down mushroom on the ground. Well, I could see the mushroom getting larger and larger and larger, getting closer to the airport. And so the CFI says, hey son, I wouldn't come down right now. I said, no, I hear you, Rich. I'm looking at it. I can see it. I'm gonna wait until it dissipates before I come down. But and it dissipated, and the gust front went across Lake Elsinore. You could see the white caps going across Lake Elsinore. So I just hung out at 9,000 feet until.
How long did it take?
It happens fairly rapidly, anywhere from half hour to 45 minutes. But again, it's weather. So that's why we look at forecasts to make sure that you're not going to get caught in something that that there's nowhere to go. That's one thing as a glider pilot, and you guys as well. You don't want to get rid of all your options. Do you guys need to open up the hangar door?
No.
Okay.
You can put the mic down if you want.
Okay, thank you. Yes. There we go. So that's one thing about flying gliders is, you don't want to get rid of your options, whether it's altitude, ground speed winds that are going to pick up at the airport. If you're doing a cross country, you always want to make sure that you're in gliding distance of an airport, or if you have a ground crew following you that has the trailer and a couple guys to help you load the aircraft, you want to make sure that there's a good road somewhere that you can land on, and your ground crew can tell you, hey, listen, there's no power poles here, it's wide open, the traffic's light, and we can stop somebody at the end of the highway if need be, where you can land and then get the glider off. The Schweitzer that we just looked at, those ones, that I can take it apart in probably 20 minutes. or less. It's got 2 main spar bolts for each wing, and then a drag spar pin. So it assembles and disassembles fairly easily. And the E model, that one, there are no extra connections for the dive brakes, spoilers. All that's done automatically. The A, B, and C models of the 126, all those have cables that have to be connected in for the ailerons and the dive brakes. The D and the E model, they've gotten rid of all that. When you put the wings on, you connect up the ailerons, you're good to go. It's a lot, fairly easy. Thermal generators. When you have the day starting to progress, the sun's got a high enough angle where it's starting to create warmth on the ground. You can have breezes that will come through anything on the ground. It could be a building, it could be the dump, anything where there's structure that changes on the ground that can enable that warm air to separate from the ground and trigger it. That's why we call them triggers, away from the ground. That's what you're looking for. And it's real important to understand the wind direction, because if you know what the wind direction is, you know where to fly on a side of the trigger. If it's a big building or what have you, the lift is going to be above and then downwind of the trigger. So this is a friend of mine's aircraft. This is in Aguila, Arizona. Does anybody know where Aguila is? Okay. Yeah, if you head west on Interstate 10, you go through into Arizona, you go through Quartzsite, and then the Interstate 10 starts to head towards Phoenix. Well, Highway 60 turns northeast and runs towards Wickenburg. Well, Aguila, this town of Aguila, is positioned kind of right in the middle of this valley. You have the, I think it's the Harquahala Mountains on the south, and the Harquavar Mountains on the north. And then this is just all real fertile farmland. And a friend of mine owns this, or he did own the ranch. It's sold now. We don't fly there anymore. But he has this ranch. And again, it's higher altitude, higher desert. And there's a lot of farmland around here. A lot of the farmland has stuff growing in it. So they're green farmland. They don't absorb the sun. A lot of these fields are discs. They're dark dirt, and they absorb a lot of heat. And so therefore, with the higher altitudes and also the difference in temperature, you get these dust devils. Yeah, you get these dust devils. You can see them that are just starting to kick off. Now you'll notice that this guy here, his canopy's open. So one thing you don't do is walk away from an aircraft with a canopy. What'll happen is a dust devil will come up, you can go slam it, crack your canopy, and do damage to the glider. But where I'm standing here, there are people close enough. You can just see a wingtip of an aircraft right there, and there's someone right here, and I'm taking a picture here. So we're fairly close to the glider. One thing you don't do is also walk away from the glider. You know, it's just sitting there. It's not tied down, okay? But we're staging the gliders to go fly. This here is my 126, and this is earlier in the morning, and the guys are out pre-flighting their gliders. They're, you know, cleaning canopies and doing what you do to get ready for the day. And this little baby shows up right behind my glider. And Harry Smith, the gentleman that owned this airport, he comes running out with his bucket hat, and he runs up, he gets right up near the bottom of it, and he takes his hat off and he goes, "Go on, get at it!" And someone yells out, "Don't do it!" Well, he was going to throw his hat. Of course, he knew he would lose his hat. That thing would suck that hat up and it'd be gone. Earlier in the day, just on the other side of where my glider is, there was a friend of mine working on his aircraft, and he had his canopy sitting off the aircraft. And he had, you know, your car out here in the summertime, you got that foldable plastic foil shade that you put up in the windshield. Well, that's what he would put up underneath his canopy right here. So he had taken that out and set that next to his aircraft. Well, the aircraft was tied down. Well, everyone's standing around talking, doing stuff, and also we hear this rattling going on. Well, there's some metal hangers that are right there, and all of a sudden you look over, and here comes this dust devil. It's probably half as wide as this hangar, and it is just churning, and it comes right over the top of the hangar, and it drops down, and someone yells, "Grab your canopy!" So he runs over, and he grabs the canopy as the dust devil drops right down on his glider, and he's sitting there holding on to it. Well, it grabbed a hold of that little shade thing for his canopy, and that in no time at all, that little shade thing was 1,800 feet in the air. And Harry Smith goes, "Well, there goes the first launch of the day," and you could see it flashing in the air. We watched it until you couldn't see it anymore. I mean, that's how high it went. This is a video, real quick. This is a dust devil here, and you can see these marks here going across the field. These are all polish marks. What's really cool is when we're flying, you can look down and you might see some in some other images here, where you can see where someone has came through and disced the field. They turned it, getting ready for planting or whatever, and this dust devil has come through and just polished. It's almost like you see a tornado in Oklahoma. You see how what happens, to the homes. Well, it's doing the same thing here at a smaller scale to these fields, and that's what's so good about Aguila. It's perfectly positioned for thermals to form. There's times where we're driving out of town. Everyone's been soaring for the 3 days. We call them a soar-fari. We've been soaring for 3 days, and everyone's on their way out of town. And as we're heading on 60, heading back towards California, there are dust devils. It looks like someone stood a number 2 pencil on its eraser, and they look like stovepipes. And you think, how can that thing be organized that high? It looks like they're going 3,000 feet. It's just the most amazing thing. It really is. And everyone's talking on the radio on their, "Hey guys, look to the north, check this out." But anyway, you play that? And you can see it churning there, but anyway, and I got another video later on. This little instrument right here, this is a portable collision avoidance system. They don't make this anymore, but I can't tell you how many times that saved me. Back then, we didn't have ADS-B in the aircraft or anything like that. So I'd be flying along, and what this thing would do is it would interrogate a transponder from like a Cessna or something like that, and it would receive the beam bounce back from air traffic control, and it would tell me where they are, above me, below me, if they were climbing towards me or descending towards me, which direction they were heading. And it's a good thing to have. So I have that mounted right there in front of me, so that way I can to see what's going on with other aircraft. This is above Aguila. Go ahead and run it.
Okay, got it. That's fine, thank you.
You can see the green farmland there. So we're all three in this big thermal. Anybody getting dizzy yet? It's pretty steep when you're in real strong lift. You wonder how you're climbing. Because a lot of times you're looking right down the wing and think, okay, why am I not just sliding? But the centrifugal force is going around. It's probably a good 45, maybe even a little bit more degree bend. Yeah.
I heard a sound. How you call that?
Yeah,
that
that's
device
that's
that's picking up the
yeah, that's a vario.
stereo.
Yeah, and that one in particular is an audio vario. In my aircraft, I have two varios. I have a mechanical one that doesn't have any noise. It's just mechanical. It just measures the lift. And how it works is there's a capacity flask. As a matter of fact, in mine, it's old thermos bottles. If you're a kid, you go to school and it has a thermos bottle. Well, that's what it is in my aircraft. It's an old thermos bottle. And there's a tube running to it. It runs through the instrument, which is the vario. And I don't know if I've got a picture later on the vario. And you guys all have rate of climb in your aircraft, you know? Well, The Vario is very similar, except it's just very, very sensitive. And what we have on the aircraft is a total energy probe, and it sticks out and it aims down, and there's a one or two tiny little holes on the back side where there's no vacuum, there's no pressure there. All it's doing is sniffing the pressure of the air outside the aircraft. So what happens is when you fly through rising air, the molecules in that column of air that's rising that you're flying through is buoyant. It's actually climbing, okay? So what happens is with the aircraft, the capacity flask underneath the dash and then the instrument, what happens is that air is trying to equalize in that capacity flask with the instrument in between. So as you're climbing, as you fly through rising air, you're flying through lighter air. Well, instantaneously, the air in that bottle is a heavier air because you just came from a lower altitude. So what happens is air tries to get out of that capacity flask, go through the vein of the Vario, and then out that total energy probe, that little probe that I was telling you about, has two little holes on it. And the instrument is so sensitive that it recognizes a rate of climb. And they have them set up so it's anywhere up to 1,000 feet a minute. And there's times where I've been in a thermal and the needle's stuck on 1,000. So you know you're going up at least 1,000 feet a minute. It could be. And in my Jumongo, I've been flying in Mountain Wave over here off of Toro, and the Vario is stuck at 1,000 feet a minute. Well, the Jumongo has the rate of climb, and it's at 1,700 feet a minute with the engine off. And the Vario just screaming at you. I mean, you turn it off because you get tired of listening to it. I mean, you know you're going up, you know. But
I've ballooned at 1,500, just trying to keep level in my Citabria.
Mhm.
I was just, it's in the wave, and the thing just kept climbing. I mean, I'm powering back, and I'm just ballooned 1,500 feet a minute.
well, Frank and John Campbell's not here, but I got something for you guys for you Citabria pilots later here in the presentation.
Oh, and then it dropped by 1,500 feet a minute, right? I mean, I was ballooning, and then all of a sudden,
Yep.
powering up, and
Yeah.
but it just kept sinking hard.
Yeah, because you have sinking air on the outside of the thermal, and as a glider pilot, we don't have the engine. Okay, so what we do, and I'm glad you brought that up. What we do is the term get high, stay high. Okay, so we want to slow down above a stall and climb in the lift, and then you're trying to make it to the next thermal. So when you fly through sinking air, that Vario will tell you, okay, now you're 1,000 feet down a minute. You don't want to tootle around in 1,000. You'll be on the ground. You want to drop the nose and speed up. That's why we use what's known as a McCready speed ring. So when you're flying through sinking air, you want to get through that sinking air to get to the lift on the other side. Now it may be a thermal, it may be a cloud. You know, when you see clouds, you'll have a cloud here and a cloud here and a cloud here. You know, glider pilots, we call those gas stations. Because the air is rising, the air is rising, forming that cloud, and it's marking where the lift is. And again, if you know where the direction of the cloud's out here, and you know that the wind is coming from over here, well, you don't want to fly over here because you're not going to be in lift. You want to fly over here, in between that line, because the lift is rising this direction. So you want to get into the lift. So you know which direction you want to head. Once you get yourself close, you'll be able to know either if you hit it right on the money and you're in the thermal, or you know, one wing lifts, depending on how strong and narrow the lift is, or which way to turn. But so you'll climb up in the lift, and all of a sudden, okay, well, I'm gonna try to fly towards Yucca Valley, and I'm gonna go towards that cloud. Well, as soon as you leave, you're expecting that Vario to go pew, just down. So you want to drop the nose, speed up, and fly through that so you can get to the next lift. So by the time you get to the next lift, you're already at a higher altitude. Go ahead and you can play this one. This is.
That's a great shot, guys. I'm shooting a video.
Oh yeah, I was looking right down on Greg. It's that shot, all right.
It's really fun to do this. pretty steep. You know? Now the reason for the audio vario, it's a safety factor. A lot of times this is what we're doing. We're flying real close to other aircraft. And so you don't need to be looking at your gauge. You want to be looking outside, keeping a spatial distance from other aircraft because you're all trying to enjoy the atmosphere and you don't want to be flying in someone's blind spot. So when we're flying, we have rules. You know, everyone always turns the same direction so you can keep an eye on everybody. We communicate, make sure you're not flying in someone's blind spot. Hey Jim, I'm coming over the top of you, 500 feet. Okay, yeah, I got you. He's looking up at you. You can't see him. So it's really nice to have the audio because, as you can hear, it's going up and down. It's changing in tone. Well, there's times where when you're 1,000 feet a minute, it's like, it's really screaming at you. Well, when you're in that strong a lift, everyone's wanting to be in the core, and you can keep an eye outside the aircraft, looking for your buddies, making sure that there's not going to be any collisions, because they do happen. And anytime when you're flying in a glider, we're just fun flying. I am wearing a parachute here, but not required to. But anytime you're flying in contests, you're required to wear a parachute. Now, anytime I'm flying here, these guys, this is my friend Steve right here, and the other aircraft that was in there, that was my CFI Greg. He's flying his 126. He's a D model. Steve here, he's got a ground crew. So he can take off from Aguila and he can say, okay, head to Wickenburg. I'm at 10,000 feet heading to Wickenburg. And then he'll find a thermal out over, there's a place that they call not Mastodon Peak, Vulture Mine. And all these guys and their ground crew, they have their maps of where different points are. And so when the pilot tells them where they're at, they know where to drive to. One other note, in regards to a finding lift and listening to the vario, I taught these guys because it was taught to me by my first CFI. My first CFI, his name was Harold Katinsky. His dad actually brought thermaling to Southern California. And what they would do is they would fly a glider out of 29 Palms, and they didn't have a tow plane. And what they would do is they would have an 800-foot tow rope, and they would use a station wagon, and they would launch the glider, and you would try to fly and lift. They would climb up, and then they would try to set records doing a triangle, flying from 29 Palms to Big Bear to Daggett, and then back, and a lot of times they were failed, they didn't make it, they had to land out, but they kept trying, and finally someone did it, and they started setting records, and then people were flying more higher performance gliders, and they were able to get to a point farther away with less altitude loss, and they just started setting records. So anyway, the trick that he taught me is, the instrument on board is the vario. You want to find out where it's telling you where the lift is, okay? The problem is a vario, the instrument has lag because air has to transfer, right? It's got to get from the total energy probe, which is either maybe on the nose of the aircraft, it could be on the tail. Mine's on the tail of the aircraft. The pitot is on the nose. So you've got all that tube. So as you're flying through air that's changing in pressure, it's got to transfer. It's got to push that air through. So by the time you get through the lift, you'll come out of the lift, and all of a sudden you're still showing that you're in lift, and then all of a sudden it'll start to drop down. What happens is you have other instruments on your aircraft that actually give you instantaneous lift. And I didn't realize this, but your airspeed indicator, the airspeed indicator, you're cruising along, and okay, you see lift come on the vario. If you watch your airspeed indicator, it'll just give you just maybe 2-3 knots. It's not much, but now what happens is when that first slide that showed you what the thermal looks like, and you get into that core, as you're flying through the core of that thermal, that air is rushing up across the nose of the aircraft. Because the pitot tube is aimed forward, it's not picking up the full volume, but what happens is you're actually seeing the core of the thermal. And there's been times where I've told these guys, listen, you guys are afraid of a land out, and you got to you're trying to save the flight. You don't want to land out, you want to continue to climb and complete your task for the day. Well, if you watch that airspeed indicator, when you're closer to the ground, you know you're a land out as possible, and you find this little 50 foot a minute thermal that's 50 feet above what your glider needs to at least stay aloft. That little trick of watching the airspeed indicator is enough to get you into that core and to fly away. And I had guys tell me, oh my gosh, how come someone didn't teach me this? You know, well, my CFI told me, he said, listen, when you're flying in a contest, don't tell all your friends about this. So anyway, they were really stoked about it. We've been flying for so long, and no one ever told us this. So here's another video. This is the one with the dust devil.
Parked right on top of this dust devil. You can see it below me. I hope you can see it below me.
When I come back around, you'll see the dust devil. Right here, look at it.
It's actually turning the same way I am.
Watch this.
Good strong lift.
I just flew through the core right there. You can see all the dirt in the air. This is probably 800 feet a minute. Now there's times you're flying along and boy, I tell you what, you pull down your seatbelts. You'll fly through sync and all of a sudden you'll get into the lift and all of a sudden it's like, boom, the seat of your pants and you look out, the wings, okay, the wings are still on, you know. But it's a lot of fun. And I think this is a video.
Okay, it is now 6 o'clock. Pretty much straight up.
Coming up on 11,000.
I'm going to be going through 11,000 feet here pretty quick. I'm showing 44 degrees. So it's kind of chilly. I'm trying to fly into the sun a little bit to keep warm. And there's 400 feet a minute right there.
Can you pause it?
Like.
Sit. Sit.
Fly back into it.
Sid. Sid. Can you pause it?
What?
Can you pause it? Okay. So right here, my airspeed indicator. Okay. Now see, this aircraft, best L over D is 53, 54 miles per hour. Okay, so right in here. Okay. But when we're flying in lift, we want to slow down because we don't want to fly real fast. We want to spend time in the lift. So we want to fly as slow as we can. Now, as you're increasing your bank angle, you're increasing your wing loading. So you can stall the aircraft. And there's one time at over 29 palms, I was at 12.5. You know, so density altitude, I was definitely in some thinner air. And I was flying the Club 126, and I'm thermaling. I'm thinking, okay, they told me to slow down. So that's what I'm doing. And next thing I know, from 12.5, I am looking at the ground down the nose of the glider. I think my eyeballs were probably as big as the top of this coffee cup. Really got my attention. And then I talked to my CFI. He goes, listen, you got to speed up, speed up, speed up. And then fly coordinated. You got the yaw string up on top as well. But anyway, so watching the airspeed indicator when you're flying in lift, especially closer to the ground, you're looking for those little few knots of increase because that's going to put you where the core of the thermal is. And of course, the core of the thermal is where the strongest lift is. This is the mechanical vario here. Now this one here, this is my audio vario, but you see the needle's on 0. I got it actually right here. I got it turned off. I didn't want to listen to it anymore. I just that's one thing about flying in a Gila. There's times where my first trip there, actually, I got there and the tow pilot was out there rolling up the tow rope, and I thought, okay, well, somebody must have landed out somewhere. He's, you know, so he rolls it up, and I thought he was going to take off. No, he pushes the aircraft into the hangar, and it's an open hangar. And he turns and looks at me. He goes, "Oh, did you want to fly? Because I just got there, just got the aircraft assembled. I haven't had anything to eat or use the restroom yet, you know." And it's like, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to go fly. Well, this is my first time at a Gila. And I said, oh, you've already got the tow plane put away. No, don't worry about it. He goes, the runway's right there. I'll get the tow rope. I'll take you. I said, you sure? He goes, yeah. He goes, go ahead, grab half of a sandwich and use the restroom, and I'll meet you at the, you know. So that's what we did. So we took off. Again, it's the high desert, and I watched him in front of me, so I pulled back on the stick so I wouldn't get low. I didn't want to fly in the wake of the tow plane. We climb up like that. We make 2 turns, and we're going through 2,000 feet above the ground. And Harry goes, well, Mike, I think that's a, what do you call it? That's a, that'll put you in space or something like that, you know, because it was really, really strong lift. So I released. He comes back and turns and lands. Well, my friend Steve and my son are on the ground, and they thought I had a rope break. I got to altitude so quick. And, but of course I didn't come back. I released at 2,000 feet. In 14 minutes, I was going through 10.5.
Oh, jeez.
Just unbelievable. It just, I've flown pretty good lift, but not that consistent. So we flew at this site a number of times, and he did end up selling the ranch, and the people that moved in around there, they got tired of people flying paragliders closer to the ground and noisy, and they didn't want people. But listen, you bought on an airport, people. What do you want, you know? But anyway, so we don't fly there anymore, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, so yeah, mechanical vario, audio vario, and then ready to climb. Okay, other types of lift is orographic or ridge lift. You know, you have air moving in, coming over a ridge. These are the rules that we use when you're flying. You weren't supposed to see that, Doug. When you're flying the ridge, you always turn away from the ridge. Never turn towards the mountain. Okay? Here we got 2 gliders. It's kind of hard to see, but there's 2 gliders right here. You never fly in someone's blind spot. You always, either you pass on one side only, as in down here. You always pass on the ridge side because the gliders are always turning away from the ridge. That's the rule. So you don't want to pass on this side, because if he goes and turns away and you come up alongside and he turns away from the ridge, he's going to fly into you. So always pass on the ridge side, and then again, when head on, always pass to the right. Now for ridge soaring, we need about 15 or a little bit more knots of wind to soar a ridge, and then depending on the lift, depends on how high the winds are, and then how high and aggressive the ridge is. You can generally fly 2 to 3 times the height of the ridge climbing up. I wrote all these notes here, and I've just been talking, I haven't even looking at them. Let's see. Okay. This is my friend Doug. We had a stem. Yep, sure. So we had a fundraiser at Bermuda Dunes Airport. That's where I used to be based. And so Doug had purchased a flight at a discount, and I donated some money to the STEM. So anyway, when we took our flight, we flew down here just south. It's actually good they're opening this. There is a ridge, these Santa Rosa Mountains that run right behind us here. They actually turn and they head south. So, hey, there's John. Hey, John, welcome to your hangar. Good. So, there's a ridge that runs kind of north and south, almost in the direction of the Salton Sea. And this day we had winds coming out of the east. And it was, now the winds were blowing hard enough that there wasn't really any lift across the valley, because the wind was just shearing off the thermals. The thermals were there, but when you get crosswinds, it just cuts them off. So we flew down there. We're flying in the ridge, and when you get to the south point and you turn around and head back north, the mountains actually climb. It climbs away from you. and we're flying in the ridge, and we're right next to the mountain, and as we're going with the height of the mountain, climbing up. It was really cool, and Doug was like, he goes, this is like one of the most amazing things I've ever done. He goes, here we are in this big old aircraft, and we're flying this ridge, and yet it's like an elevator ride. We're going right up alongside the ridge. And that's one thing about flying in ridge. You're flying pretty close to terrain, you know, and in a 172 or 150 or 182, you're really not seeing a lot of that because you're up higher altitude and you're zipping by it. But you're really going to see a lot of cool things, soaring birds and all kinds of stuff when you're flying in ridge.
Mike, can I ask a question about, you were talking about when you go from the outside into the core, if you watch your airspeed indicator, it's going to fluctuate a couple times.
Yep.
I was thinking that it would go lower, your airspeed indicator would go lower because the air is coming up, pushing your nose up a little bit. And at that constant speed that you have, wouldn't that, when you would start going a little slower?
No, you're not, no, because the reading is instantaneous. When you're cruising along, you're flying in level flight because you're trying to fly best performance of the aircraft. So it's not like the aircraft raises like this and then the wind coming up is hitting it at a different angle. The nose is out there in the front where the pitot is. So all of a sudden the nose goes right across that rush, and because the pitot is aiming straight forward, it's only picking up that mild rush. If that pitot tube was actually aiming down a little bit, it would actually get more of a rush. Does that make sense to you?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Okay,
A little extra
so-
pressure,
Huh?
like a tiny bit of extra pressure all of a sudden.
Exactly, and that's the reason why it's only a couple knots. I mean, the most I've seen is maybe 5 or 6 knots, which you're flying. That's a, I mean, yeah,
Increase or decrease?
increase,
Increase.
Yeah, it's a gust right across the nose of the aircraft.
And it's just a blip.
Yeah,
You just
it's
can see
it looks like it goes. You know, it's just when it comes over, you say you're flying at 50 knots. It might go to 56. You know, and what's really cool is when you're watching that, you feel it in the seat of your pants, especially if you're flying like a 126. Now this aircraft here is a lot heavier. Once you learn how to fly it, people say, yeah, it kind of flies like a 126. Everyone says all the gliders fly like a 126. Yes and no. There's really nothing that flies like a 126 because it's got a 40-foot wingspan. It thermals really, really nice close to the ground. You're not going to do that in something like this with a 58-foot wingspan. You're not going to be thermaling close to the ground. That's something that you don't do.
See, Mike, on a corollary of this, then when you approach that column of air on the outside, you say it's coming down. Is your airspeed going to decrease just a hair as you're approaching that?
It may, but I don't think that's even enough to notice, because the air that's going around is, as a whole, around the outside of the glider. So the air that's sinking around the thermal is actually going down a lot slower than that hot air in the core rising. So it's a big difference. Yeah. Okay, mountain wave. This is really, really cool and fun to fly in. Now, it can be exciting because with mountain wave, you have what's known as rotor. Now, the phenomenon of mountain wave, certain things have to exist. If you guys looked at your weather for flying and you have winds at 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, what altitude do you guys in powered aircraft fly? Between 6 and 8, maybe 10? Is that pretty close?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're looking at winds aloft forecasts, and that first slide that I showed you that had the polar, fair, good, extreme, all those different types of lift. Let's see where I was going with that.
The rotors?
No. Those are in that it shows you at the bottom of that. It shows you different altitude. It shows you the temperature. It shows you the wind direction and then the wind speed. Okay. Well, when you guys look at your aviation weather, you see that 3, 6 at the ground, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. you know, that you can look at. Well, if you see the wind going at different directions, from 3, 6, 9, and they're coming in different directions, or they're not all pretty much the same direction, that's not a stable air mass, because you have different air at different altitudes moving in different directions. Well, a stable air mass, and we generally have those in the wintertime, where you'll get a push off the coast. That's what's really good about flying in Southern California. We have mountains that run parallel with the mountain, with the ocean. Look at the Sierras. The Sierras from south of Inyokern. Inyokern is really where the mountains, the Sierras drop into the ground, just north of Tehachapi. But the Sierras, they run all the way to Tahoe. They just keep going. Well, when you have a stable air mass, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, all that air, a stable air mass is all moving in the same direction, okay? They're just increasing with altitude. So what happens is as the air comes in, as the air comes over that mountain, it compresses, okay? And once it drops on the backside of the mountain, it's trying to equalize, because it's under pressure now because of the mountain. Well, it decreases in pressure when it starts to spread apart. Well, the air down below and farther up above as well, as it drops in altitude, and I'll get to this next slide so you can actually see it here. This will help. So this is the mountain here. Okay, you have a stable air mass, and it shows the wind here. Just know that the wind, as it goes up and up and up and up and up, is pretty much moving in the same direction. But what happens is, as the air comes over and drops down, it drops in pressure. Or, I mean, it increases in pressure and increases in temperature. And because it's a stable air mass, it wants to rebound. And now as it is ascending up to the primary wave right here, it's starting to cool. And the pressure is getting less and less and less. But because it's a stable air mass, it wants to rebound. So what does it do? It comes back down, and it does this. And this wave here, I've seen satellite images where mountain wave off the Sierras has gone for 1,000 miles. If moisture is present, you'll get these clouds, and it's really cool to see from a satellite. You'll see a cloud, and they're long tubes. They're long lenticulars, and a lot of the airline pilots, they see them. And what's the one gentleman? I forget what his name is. Anyway, he's an airline pilot, not Steve, but the other guy that flies. He's been up flying and has seen mountain wave down. He's, oh man, I like to be down in that mountain wave. Anyway, so these are lenticular clouds, and what happens is as the air is coming in, there is moisture. If there is moisture in one of those boundary layers, as it drops, as it comes and builds back up, as the air comes up, it starts to condense. And that air gets really, really cold. Well, it can no longer hold the moisture content because colder air cannot hold the moisture like warm air can. So what happens is it forms this cloud. And these clouds are really, really cool because they can be really thin, and they got this wing form to them. And the amazing thing here is right here on this leading edge of the wave, the air is, I mean, really smooth. Wherever you guys are sitting, it's that smooth. You're sitting in the aircraft, and all you hear is outside the aircraft, and if you got the Vario on, it's beep, 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 600 feet a minute. And for the Jamongo, when I'm flying, I don't want to get below 44. It'll stall right around 44, 43, somewhere in there. And at altitude, maybe a little bit higher. So if the winds are blowing hard enough, say the winds are blowing 50, you can actually fly, get the aircraft slowed down right in this area, right in here. If you can get it slowed down to 50, you turn on your flight computer, your ground speed is 0. You're not moving, but you're going up 5, 6, 700 feet a minute. And what's amazing is this lenticular does not show the top of the lift. It actually keeps going. It keeps going and keeps going. You guys have seen a rock in a stream. The water's flowing, and all of a sudden the water will do this behind that rock. Well, those are little standing waves, okay? And I guess if that rock was big enough, I mean, people actually surf on those things, okay? So, but because here we have different layers of wind that are moving, that are increasing in speed, this phenomenon here just keeps going up. It's amazing. We can't fly in Class A airspace unless we have a wave window. Now, the people over here at Warner Springs, they've talked with the FAA. They actually have an area where their wave shows up on a regular basis, and they have a wave window that the FAA has designated for them. And if the wave is happening, they'll call air traffic control and say, hey, listen, we'd like a wave window from 11 p.m. to 5 p.m. today. And FAA will come back and you tell them yes or no. I think there was this presidential, call them that, fly into San Diego, and they may say, no, we have other aircraft, we can't open that. But yeah, we can, and what they'll do is the air traffic control will divert aircraft around that wave window so gliders can actually go out there with their transponders and they can go above 18, 19. My CFI even showed me a picture. He was at 29,000 feet over the Sierras. And he was probably dressed like an Eskimo. Oh yeah. And man, I was gonna set that up. I actually brought my oxygen. I'm glad you said that. I have my oxygen bottle and my oxygen computer. I have a computer and you guys can get it for your aircraft as well, but you guys don't really fly at that altitude. I have a mountain high oxygen system that the computer, you can set it to turn on like at 10,000 feet. So you'll be flying, you'll turn on the regulator, you've got your flight computer plugged in to the O2 system, and me and my passenger both are have our cannulas connected into it, and you'll be going through 10,000 feet, and all of a sudden you'll be breathing in, and the cannula, it senses the vacuum because you have the two little tubes going into your nostrils, and as you're breathing in, it'll go, and you get a shot of oxygen. Now, in the old days, it used to be just continuous. You have a mask you'd put on, and it was always turned on. So it was very consumptive. It would waste a lot of oxygen. It was nice because you had oxygen, but it wouldn't last very long. Well, the cool thing about the mountain high flight computers is as you're climbing in altitude, it knows that you're climbing in altitude because it has a pressure sensitive instrument inside. And what it does is it just increases the injection of oxygen. So you're flying, every time you breathe in, it gives you a shot of oxygen. What's really fun is hold your breath, and after 30 seconds, it's just going beep, 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 like, did you die or something, But anyway, now this here is a rotor cloud. Now, right in here, because it's turning, this is a low pressure. And if you've ever been on tow, behind a tow plane, flying towards where the wave is, the tow plane is going to have to fly probably through this rotor. They generally try to fly along the bottom, so right in here it gets really, really rough. Here you got a tailwind, so you're moving really, really fast. And you know that you're going to be coming into the lift fairly quick right here, and that's where you release from the tow plane and then you start to fly and you climb up. Well, right here, this is showing you the cloud. Now, if it was colder air, it would actually be even a little bit lower. Right here, when we have wave come in over the southern spine of San Jacinto, we can get, if moisture is present enough, you can get that rotor cloud. And I've been out there cleaning my swimming pools, and I'm out in the backyard with my pool looking up like this, and my customers come out, Mike, get your head out of the clouds, what are you looking at? And I'm watching that rotor cloud, and you can actually see the cloud form right here in the mist, come over, and then you can watch it sink on the backside and then dissipate. And it's just going around and around and around. And my first CFI, what he did is he told his dad, he goes, no, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to explore the rotor. And his dad's like, okay, your airplane. So what he did is he went out there and he got in, got the tow, climbed up over the top. He would come on the back side, and then what he would do is he would dive down under while he's still at altitude and speed up and get, and he goes, I went out there and I played in that rotor. I goes, I had the best time. It's like a kid in a candy store, man. He goes, I just all day long just going, flying around that rotor. And it was a good exercise because he learned, but right through the middle here, I'm telling you what, if you're on tow, the tow plane's doing this, and you're trying not to break a tow rope. you're doing your best to stay on, you know. And the co-pilot, hang on, and he's got his hands full. And one of the things the guys talk about on a wave day is they're talking about everyone's got their hands full flying behind the tow plane in order. So this is so this here shows you the variometer. Okay, so as you're coming in, here's the flight path right here. This is a lot of sink right here because they're dropping down. This is showing 600 feet a minute down. Here there's no sink, no climb, and it's showing this is up. Yeah, we're on the upwind side. It's showing you 600 feet a minute right here, and then right here, look at it, showing you 900 feet a minute right here. So a week ago Saturday, I had 2 flights. The guy flew with me a year ago with him and his son. Well, this time he brought his son's girlfriend. And his son wasn't going to fly, but he bought a flight for his girlfriend and for him. So I took his girlfriend up over here, and we got on the leading edge of Martinez right here. So San Jacinto is, the ridge of San Jacinto is good, what, 12, 14, 15, 16 miles away. So what happens is, right behind the ridge of San Jacinto right here is this is the primary wave, and then you have the secondary wave, and then over here you have the tertiary wave. And I think we have, yeah, this is what it looks like. So you have your primary, secondary, and tertiary wave. So her and I got on the west side of Martinez, and all of a sudden the engine's running. I'm getting ready to shut it down because we're getting close to the altitude for my routine to cruise. And as I pulled it back to an idle, we're still going up, and I'm showing 400, 500 feet a minute up. And it's really, really smooth, which is indicative of a mountain wave. So I told her, I said, you know what, hey, we're in mountain wave. So I still had like 500 or 600 feet to go before I was at the altitude of, because now I'm in the wave, why run the engine? Let the let the air take me up. By the time we turned around, I was going through 8,000 feet. And that flight only goes to 7,000 feet. It's a half-hour plus flight. It ended up being over 3/4 of an hour. So I was really excited when we landed. I told him, I said, hey, we have mountain wave going on. And he had purchased a long flight for himself. So we took off. We just continued to climb through the tertiary wave, got up into the secondary wave, into here, and then penetrated till we got right about here. I shut down. We shut down at 8,000, not quite 8,500, and we took it to 15,000 feet. And you could see 100 miles off the coast of California. The Salton Sea looked like a dinner plate. It's a lot of fun. One time I got into mountain wave off of Toro, which is right out here. Now Toro, on the backside, it's really steep. If you're in an aircraft and you look on the back, it's really, really steep. So what happens is it makes these do this. The amplitude is really, really high. So we got on the backside of Martinez. My the rate of climb went to 1,700 feet a minute. And I didn't have oxygen on board. And I thought, well, let's just see where this goes. And I got my attention. I watched Martinez just do this. With the engine off, if you watch a mountain just disappearing from view, you're not used to seeing that. It's really freaky. And that one, I climbed up to 17.5, but then came right back down because. Yeah, but you can see the Coronado Islands down in Mexico. Anyway, so this is what mountain wave looks like when you're flying in it. And I don't think this is not a video, right? Yeah, this isn't a video.
No.
So so here's the Salton Sea, and you can see this cloud here starting to form. Okay, it's really, really smooth. This right here, this is Palm Canyon Creek. So the point of the mountain is out here somewhere. The southern spine of San Jacinto is right out here. So what happens is the air is coming down, building pressure and temperature. It's rebounding, and this is the primary wave right here. We're getting closer to it, and it's really fun to fly, to see the cloud, the mist start to form. Now we're turned back. We're actually heading north. This is San Jacinto. You can just see right here, and we're going up here. Isn't that cloud beautiful? It's amazing. And we're just beep, 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 going up. And it's really, really smooth. You can tell that there's a lot of waves. Look at these wave lenticulars that are south. This is down off Anza Borrego. Looks like you can just step out and walk on it, doesn't it? Better picture of the Salton Sea there. Is one of these a video?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So, and the last thing is a convergence zones. Here in Southern California, we have what's known as the Elsinore Convergence, and it's quite famous. It really is. When we get air that is heavier over the ocean, we've got this beautiful thing of cold air right off the coast, right? Well, the Inland Empire heats up. It builds a lot of heat. That's what happens with the Inland Empire. Well, we have the Santa Ana Mountains that run parallel to the coast. Well, that heavy air, it wants to run up and it's trying to get to where this air is rising over the Inland Empire, right? That air is becoming more buoyant. It's creating a lower pressure underneath it. Well, it wants to suck in that air. Well, on the north side of, if this was the Santa Ana Mountains right here, and this was like Santiago Peak, and here's Lake Elsinore back here, what happens is this Los Angeles plain right here, it's lower, and the cooler air can come in underneath. Well, the thing is over here is Temecula, and here's Camp Pendleton down here. Well, this air runs in because it can't go through these mountains either. So this colder air, heavier air, comes in, and what happens is it starts to collide right behind this, the Santa Ana Mountains. Now, I tried to get a hold of a video. There's a famous video with Lake Elsinore where someone took a camera like this and set a time lapse for the Elsinore Convergence. And what's really cool is if this was Santiago Peak, you're looking to the north, and all of a sudden you'll see these line of clouds that'll start to pop. Well, all that air is colliding, rising the air, pushing it up. You'll get haze domes, which, if you have smoggy air and you get lift that's going on, you'll start to see haze domes start to form. Well, that's all lift out there. If there's enough moisture, if it gets high enough, those little haze domes will start to turn white. They'll have actually turn into a cloud. So what happens is, as the day is progressing and the air is moving in, what happens is that air collides. This air up here is stronger than this down here because this is coming in from the west right here. So this air's got a little bit more energy to it. So what happens is this line of clouds here, and they'll pop, and the time lapse shows them moving towards the southeast down across the Inland Empire. And what's amazing is this lift here, it may be 2,000 feet above the ground. It may go to 10,000 feet. And you can take off at Lake Elsinore, get over Canyon Lake, and fly north with the tow plane and get into this convergence right here, and you can go back and forth. Now we have controlled airspace with Ontario and places like that, so you have to be careful of where you're going to fly through. But you can fly from Lake Elsinore all the way to the San Gabriel Mountains. And some gliders in high performance, they're doing it at high speeds and 2,000 feet, 2,500 feet, and you can go back and forth and back and forth. It's really cool to fly in. There is another convergence zone that is north of the LA area, but it's a lot smaller. Some of the glider pilots up there do fly in some of that, but this is really a lot of fun to fly in. And then just for fun, this is my aircraft, what it used to look like, and I was going to bring him in. I have him in my car. This aircraft was on the back of 4 magazines of Soaring. And it was labeled, come fly the 500 series. It doesn't look like that anymore, but this is the way I found it. I found it in a storage in Santa Monica, California, and the guy hadn't flown it in 18 years, had health issues, and hated to see it go. But I told him, I said, listen, it's not my aircraft. I'm only going to be fixing it up and making it better for the next pilot who ever has it. And he told me, he says, when you told me that, he goes, that's why I knew I wanted to sell it to you. He goes, because I don't want someone to go out there and take it to a club and tear it up, and because this is historic. It's the first one in history that's all aluminum. This is me with my CFI Greg here, Greg Caldwell, and this is Mike Havener. This is at Lake Elsinore, and this aircraft here is, he's the DPE, the Designated Pilot Examiner for Southern California here. This is 88 Whiskey, this 233, and that's what I got my commercial in, and that's one of the aircraft that not the aircraft I soloed in first, but that's a great place to fly, Lake Elsinore. Okay, thermaling is Citabria, and we're almost done here. This story here is about a guy that took a club member for a flight in the Citabria, and it had a new motor in it, and the motor started getting hot, and they were away from the airport. Well, this guy happened to be a glider pilot, so he pulls it down to an idle to let the engine cool off, and they're looking for a place to land, and there's a field, and he doesn't want to bring the RPMs back up because he's going to cook a brand new engine. So he continues to let it idle. They actually he finds a thermal, he thermals back up. He actually works his way high enough to get back to the airport. And he actually taxis up, they push the aircraft up to the mechanic and they check it out. I don't know what happened, but anyway, you can thermal a Citabria. You can. And then famous people I've flown with, John Cambroff, where are you?
Uh-oh,
Where's
right
John?
here.
Hey, John.
The John Cambroff?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I was out here, I had a flight one day and he was here. I said, hey, you want to go for a flight? He goes, yeah. So we went up, we had a great time. And thanks for letting us use the hangar. It's nice. You guys all know Santa Claus, Doug. Yeah. And again, you never know who you're going to get to fly with. This guy calls me. He says he's a T-38 jet pilot and a U-2 spy plane pilot. And he goes, I need to learn how to fly a Jamongo. And I said, well, there's a problem. I said, I don't let anybody else fly my aircraft. And he goes, well, I'm a jet pilot and I fly the U-2 spy plane. Well, believe it or not, the U-2 spy plane has the same performance as my 126. It's about 23-to-1 with the engine off. So we talked for a while. I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to fly from Bermuda Dunes down to Thermal, where we got nice big runways, and go fly. So anyway, we get in, we're flying down here, and he's flying it like a jet. And I'm rocking the wing, turning and banking, and I said, no, this is not the way this wants to be flown. And I asked him, why do you want to learn how to fly? He goes, well, I'm putting in an application for NASA, because NASA uses this aircraft to measure the sonic boom, the wave bouncing off the Earth with spacecraft as it bounces up into the atmosphere. And they can't do that with a regular aircraft. They don't want to shut the engine down. It's not made to glide, it's noisy. And this aircraft has retractable gear, so the profile is really, really clean when they're flying. So I said, okay, so we come down, we're flying. He's flying it like a T-38, and I told him, I said, listen, your examiner with NASA is not going to want to see you flying it. They want to see you fly coordinated, nice smooth turns, blah, blah, blah. So he goes, okay. So I let him do 3 landings after I showed him a couple on how to do it. On the third one, he got really good. I could see it. Okay, yeah, give me one more. So they gave me one more, and it was really good. Well, I get a call from him. He says, hey, I want you to come up to to Palmdale, and I want you to go through the U-2 spy plane project. I'm like, you're kidding me. He goes, no. I said, can I bring my wife and my son? He goes, yep, absolutely. Well, my wife and my son couldn't make it. So I called him, I said, it's just going to be me, I'm not going to be able to make it. He goes, listen, bring anybody you want. So I took Greg Caldwell, my CFI, and my club president from 29 Palms, and another club member at 29 Palms. We jumped in his 210, we flew to Fox Field from Bermuda Dunes. It was really cool, cruising at 200 knots across the high desert. Landed at Fox, we got a car. As we're coming into Palmdale, there's a guard gate there, and he told me, he said, listen, there's going to be a guard gate there, just blow through the checkpoint. I'm like, what? And so I told him, Greg was driving the rental car, and I said, just keep going, just drive. He goes, he hits the brakes. I said, Greg, he said, just blow through it. So as we go through, the arms open like this, and we go through the checkpoint, and everyone in the car's like, wow, that was weird. You just don't bolt through a checkpoint. So he told me, he says, hey, listen, there's parking lot's full. There's going to be one spot right next to the commander. Pull into there. That's your spot. So we drive through. Sure enough, it's packed. That only spot open was for a guest right next to the commander. So we pull in, and we're walking in, and of course there's serpentino wire, there's all this stuff going on. As we're getting close to the house where they check your ID and everything, this guy's sitting out there having his lunch, and he stops eating. He looks up at us and he goes, "Who are you guys?" And I said, "Well, I'm a friend of Taylor. Taylor, he said I could come up and he's gonna give me a tour." And he goes, "I can't get my mom in this place." So we go in, they take our ID, all this stuff. Well, here comes Taylor walking through this big, huge building, this big hangar. And all the guys are stepping aside there to give him a salute, and he's like, get out of here, you know. So he comes into the room, he goes, "Hey, Mike," and I introduce him to everybody, and my CFI goes, "What is your rank?" He goes, "Oh, I'm the commander." I had no clue. So I got to fly. This is the youngest guy in history to be in charge of our U-2 spy plane project. And as we're going through, we got 3-hour tour. I mean, it was the most amazing. My hair was standing on my head. My head was tingling. All the information. We got to see everything about the spy plane, the space suits. They're working on them. We got to watch them pull the cameras out of the nose that he was in, the aircraft he was flying the day before. They can shoot the entire state of California with one roll of film at 70,000 feet in one flight. And it was just amazing. They even gave us these little tubes of food. I think I got caffeinated apple pie. They had beef stroganoff, and they had this little hot pipe sitting inside the aircraft that when they were flying for these long durations, they would take these little tubes, and before they'd tell the guy helping them get into the aircraft, because they got their spacesuit on, what they wanted to eat. So they would pack all their food. So as they're flying, they would drop these tubes to get their beef stroganoff or whatever. And there's a little tube on the helmet, and they'd stick it through and suck it through a hole. It's just, but he said that's what you had to do to eat, you know. And he goes, they also give us a diaper to wear because you can't use the restroom. He said, "Listen, this is your only suit, so don't bring it back dirty because I'm not washing it." But anyway, one of the most amazing times I've ever had. So it was really, really cool. This is here at the Skunk Works. I did have a zoomed in picture, but I didn't get it. I wish I could read that, but it's really good. They watch everybody one frame at a time. And then this is inside. This is Greg, Chip. This is our club president, Donald. He had been to see the F-117, the Blackbird. You know, he had seen all those. This is the one aircraft that he did not see, and he got to see it. And this was the one that they were restoring. And it was just an epic day. I'll never forget it. And then this was taken by a lady. This is the North Slope of San Jacinto this year. She was on the freeway. You guys have seen it. She captured this with her phone. It had an avalanche, very rare avalanche on San Jacinto. Anyway, that's it, guys.
All right.